I opened a small bakery despite my parents' disapproval. Now it's booming. And they want me to buy a vacation home because they deserve it. I'm 29 years old and the owner of a small business that has become bigger than I ever imagined. It all started when I was 18. And I made the most difficult and liberating decision of my life, to follow my passion for baking instead of going to college. The problem was, my parents were totally against it. Since I have memory, I've always loved to bake. At 10, I made cakes for my friends' birthdays. At 15, I sold cupcakes at school to raise money. By 18, I knew I wanted to make this my life. My parents, however, had very different plans. Both of them emigrated to the United States with great sacrifices and believed that a university degree was the only path to success. They wanted me to study something serious, like medicine or engineering. When I told them I wanted to open a baking business, they laughed. They thought I was joking, but I wasn't. That summer, I rejected all my university acceptance letters and used my savings earned from years of selling cakes and sweets to rent a small space in a local shopping center. It was a decision that unleashed a storm in my home. My parents told me I was throwing my life away, that I would never achieve anything, and that I would end up asking them for help to pay the bills. So, I did what any stubborn young person would do. I moved out of the house, rented a small studio near my business, and started working on my business. It was hell at the beginning. My place was almost empty most days, and there were months when I could barely pay the rent. My parents refused to talk to me. Only my best friend and an aunt who always supported me encouraged me to keep going. My aunt even lent me money when I couldn't cover the costs. For the first 2 years, I worked 12 hours a day, every day. Sometimes I cried while decorating cakes because I was so exhausted that I didn't know how to keep going. But slowly, things began to change. I started to receive more orders, especially for weddings and events. Then, one of my cakes went viral on Instagram. And suddenly I had customers calling me from everywhere. My parents, however, remained uninterested. According to them, I was still playing around with my life. Even at family gatherings, they made sure to tell everyone that my younger brother was studying law at a prestigious university while I was still pursuing my hobby. It hurt, but I learned to ignore it. At 24, things changed drastically. I opened a second location in another part of the city. By 26, I already had a team of 6 people working with me. I even appeared on a local television program that highlighted successful small businesses. But even that wasn't enough to impress my parents. When I mentioned it casually at a family gathering, my mom changed the subject to talk about my brother's grades. I decided that it was pointless to seek their approval. My business was my life. And it was doing well. More than well, actually. The years passed, and I managed to buy my own space on a main street, which significantly reduced my rental costs. I also bought my first car, a little luxury I had always wanted. However, the real drama began last year when I attended my cousin's wedding. My parents were there, and although I tried to keep things cordial, I wasn't surprised that they barely spoke to me. What did surprise me was what happened later. At my cousin's wedding, everything seemed to be going as usual. My parents were busy showing off my brother's achievements, who was now working at a prestigious law firm. I was trying to stay out of the way and enjoy the event without getting into awkward conversations. My cousin, who had always been like a sister to me, knew how much my business had grown. So, at some point during the reception, she decided to mention it in her speech. She said something like, "I want to thank my incredible cousin for the wedding cake. It's not only beautiful, but it comes from her business, which is taking the city by storm." Suddenly, all eyes were on me. There were applause, congratulations, and even some curious questions from relatives who had no idea how much I had achieved. It was a beautiful moment until I saw the expression on my parents' faces. My mom was visibly uncomfortable, while my dad simply frowned and looked away. It was as if they couldn't bear to hear that I had achieved something without their blessing. I tried not to give it importance, but the discomfort intensified when some relatives started asking for details. How many locations do you have now? How many employees? And the inevitable, how much do you earn per year? I just gave vague answers. But my cousin, who was a little excited by the champagne, dropped the bomb. Don't be modest. She makes 6 figures a year. She is one of the most successful entrepreneurs I know." The entire room went silent for a second. My parents looked petrified. My dad was the first to react with a forced smile and an awkward, "Oh, that sounds interesting." My mom, on the other hand, couldn't avoid a passive-aggressive comment, "Well, good for you that you've finally found something that works for you." Finally. As if the years of struggle, hard work, and sacrifices didn't count until someone validated my success on a microphone. Despite that, I decided not to engage. I let the moment pass and moved away to enjoy the rest of the night. However, I didn't expect what came next. 2 days after the wedding, my parents called me, which was already rare because they barely communicated with me. I answered, thinking that maybe they wanted to clarify something or even congratulate me in private. However, reluctantly, but it was a completely different conversation. My mom started with a casual tone. "Your dad and I have been talking, and we think it's time to put aside our differences. We want to rebuild our relationship with you." For a moment, I thought this was a breakthrough. But then my dad chimed in. "We also believe that since you are doing so well financially, you could help us a little. You know, repair the damage of the last few years." "What damage?" I asked, confused. "Well, when you made that impulsive decision to drop out of university, you broke our hearts," my mom said. "We worked so hard to bring you to this country, and we felt that you had disappointed us. But now that you've made something of your life, we think it would be fair if you gave back." At first, I didn't understand exactly what they meant. But when my dad started talking about sharing responsibilities and compensating for their sacrifice, everything became clear. They wanted money. Not just a little help, but something big. My mom made it very clear when she said, "We've been dreaming of having a house in Florida to retire in. It would be wonderful if you could help us fulfill that dream. Think of it as a way to thank us for everything we did for you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask them where they had been during the most difficult moments of my life. When I was struggling to keep my business afloat. When I cried from exhaustion because I had no support. I wanted to remind them how they had treated me as a family embarrassment for years. But instead, I took a breath and said as diplomatically as I could, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that." My mom let out a theatrical sigh. "I knew you'd say something like that. You've always been selfish." My dad added, "It's a shame because your brother has already done so much for us. We thought it would be your turn now." I hung up before saying something I would regret. But that wasn't the end. Within days, they started calling me constantly. When I didn't answer, they sent long, passive-aggressive messages. My mom even tried to go through my aunt, saying she was worried about me. But it was all an excuse to keep asking for money. The messages and calls became incessant. My parents were obsessed with the idea of the house in Florida. Each message they sent me seemed like a new strategy to convince me, blame me, or even shame me. Some messages were full of manipulative nostalgia. "Remember how we worked day and night to give you a decent home and food on the table? Is this how you thank us?" Others were more direct. "Your brother has already carried this responsibility for years. It's time for you to do your part." My patience was at its limit. For years, I had tried not to resent them, even when they treated me like a disappointment. But now they were crossing every boundary. After blocking their numbers, they started using unknown numbers. If I didn't answer, they moved on to emailing me. Each one was more desperate than the last. One even said, "If you can't help us with the house, at least transfer something for our immediate needs. $50,000 would be a good start." Yes, I read that right. $50,000 as a good start. What world do these people live in? I tried to stay calm, but that email was the last straw. I felt like I needed to talk to someone. So I called my aunt, the only person in my family who had always supported me. After telling her everything, she let out a long sigh. "You know what's worst," she told me. "They don't see you as their daughter. They see you as a lottery ticket that finally paid off." Those words hurt because they were true. For years, my value to them seemed to have depended on what they could use to show off to others. Or now, on what they could extract financially. My aunt suggested that I set clear boundaries and that if they kept pressuring me, I would cut ties. I hated the idea of cutting ties with my family, but I couldn't keep letting them treat me this way. I decided to respond to them. But this time in writing so that my feelings were clear. My email said something like this: Mom, Dad, I am tired of this constant harassment. For years, I did everything possible to earn your respect and support. But I never received it. Instead, you discouraged me and made me feel like I would never be enough for you. Now that I have achieved something on my own, you have no right to claim a part of it. I don't owe you anything. And I'm not going to give you money to buy a house or anything else. It's time for you to respect my decisions and my life. If you can't do that, I see no reason to continue in contact. It wasn't easy to send that message. A part of me hoped they would understand, that they would finally realize how much damage they had done. But honestly, I no longer expected much from them. Shortly after, my cousin, the one who got married, called me. She told me that my parents were furious and that they were now going through the entire family tree trying to recruit allies. They had told a twisted version of the facts, claiming that I had cut off all contact for no reason and that I was being ungrateful after all the sacrifices they made for me. The icing on the cake was when my brother also got involved. He sent me a long message saying that my parents were devastated and that I should reconsider my position. According to him, it wasn't just about money, but about maintaining family unity. He also mentioned that although he understood that our parents had not always been fair to me, at the end of the day, they are still our parents, and we have to honor them. That message was hard to read. My brother and I had never been close, but we didn't have a bad relationship either. However, this time I felt that he was completely on my parents' side. I tried to respond to him calmly. I know you're trying to mediate, but this is not something you can solve. They never supported me, not even when I needed them most. Now, they expect me to meet expectations that they never had for you. It's not fair or healthy for me. I've built my life without them, and I'm not going to allow their guilt and manipulation to control me now. I hope you understand. His response was brief, almost cold. I understand, but I don't share your view. After that began the worst part. My parents took the drama to social media. They posted messages full of passive aggressiveness, saying things like, "It's painful when a child forgets everything their parents did for them." They also started insinuating that my aunt and my cousin were alienating me from the family. This obviously unleashed a wave of gossip among relatives. At first, I thought about ignoring it. But when they started tagging my business in publications and leaving negative comments on my page, I knew I had to act. I sent them a final message making it clear that if they continued to damage my reputation, I would take legal action. Although that calmed things down a bit, it wasn't the end. Their resentment continued to simmer and look for new ways to surface. After the storm on social media, things seemed to calm down, at least for a while. My parents stopped tagging my business and posted fewer indirect comments. Although they continued to complain to any relative willing to listen, I decided to focus on my work and on the people who really supported me. But I couldn't ignore the constant tension that floated in the air. Then, one day, my cousin called me with news that I didn't know whether to take as a joke or a warning sign. "Your parents came to my house yesterday. They were crying. Crying." That didn't fit with the image of my parents, who had always been proud and firm in their positions, even when they were wrong. What did they want? I asked, doubting that it was something good. They said they were sorry, that they didn't know how they had gone so far, but that they wanted to make peace with you. Basically, they were trying to get me to intercede to convince you to forgive them. My cousin, being the direct person she is, asked them what had changed. According to her, my mom admitted that they had reacted badly at the beginning of my career but that they thought I was exaggerating with my decision to cut off contact. My dad, on the other hand, seemed more concerned with cleaning up the family image than with a real reconciliation. It wasn't the first time that their motives seemed more selfish than sincere. The most surprising thing, however, was that they mentioned something new. Apparently, now they wanted to include me in the family will. My cousin said that they seemed to use it as an incentive for me to reconsider my position. "The will?" I asked, almost laughing. "Seriously?" "Yes," my cousin responded. "I don't know what to tell you. It seemed like an attempt to buy you." That comment left me thinking. I had no interest in inheritances or in any other offer that came with manipulative conditions. But at the same time, I wondered if they were beginning to realize how much they had ruined our relationship and if they were now desperate to get it back. Despite my doubts, I did not respond immediately. My cousin advised me not to do anything until I was absolutely sure of what I wanted. So, I took a few days to reflect. However, the tranquility did not last long. Just a week later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my mom. I decided to answer more out of curiosity than anything else. Her tone was different. Less aggressive and more subdued. I didn't know whether to trust this new attitude. But I let her speak. She began by saying that she was tired of fighting and that all she wanted was for the family to be united again. She assured me that they would not ask for money again or involve other family members in the conflict. "We want to fix things," she said, almost pleading. "Your dad and I made mistakes. We know it. We just want us to be a family again." There was a part of me that wanted to believe her. That wanted to cling to the idea that maybe, after all, they could change. But so much time had passed. And so many things had happened that it was hard for me to trust. So, I asked her a direct question. "Does this have anything to do with the house in Florida?" There was a long silence. Then she said, "No, well, not entirely. It's just that we thought that with the family united, we could work together to help each other. It doesn't have to be the house. But it would be good to know that we can count on you." There it was. The money was still at the core of everything. No matter how they disguised it. It was still the same old thing. My parents didn't want to reconcile because they cared about our relationship. They wanted to reconcile because it was convenient for them. I don't think we can be a united family if there are always expectations and conditions. I replied calmly. If you really want to fix things, you have to show it, not say it. And for now, I need space. My mom tried to insist, but I didn't give in. I hung up feeling more exhausted than ever. It wasn't long before my brother wrote to me again, clearly annoyed. According to him, my parents were suffering, and I was being too harsh with them. He told me that I should give them a chance, that they were sorry, and that even if they had not been perfect, they were still my parents. This time I didn't answer. I didn't see the point in arguing with someone who clearly didn't understand the magnitude of the damage they had done. I decided it was time to focus on protecting my peace and stop worrying about other people's expectations, even if it meant cutting ties permanently. However, I didn't expect what happened next. Just when I thought things were about to calm down, I received an email from a lawyer. My parents had decided to formalize my inclusion in the will, stating in writing that I would be responsible for taking care of them when they could no longer do it. When I opened the lawyer's email and read the attached document, I didn't know whether to laugh or get angry. My parents had drafted what seemed more like a contract than a will. Basically, it stipulated that they would leave some properties and assets to my brother and me, but with one condition: I would have to commit to covering their financial needs in the future, including funding their ideal retirement. They did not specify exact amounts but included vague phrases such as maintaining a standard of living according to what we deserve and providing full financial support when necessary. It was absurd. Not only did they expect me to sign a legal commitment, but they didn't even try to consult me before sending it. It was evident that for them, this document was a way to have additional control over my life disguised as family reconciliation. My first reaction was to ignore it, but my curiosity led me to send it to a lawyer friend to review it. His analysis was clear. The document had no legal weight. It was nothing more than an informal attempt at emotional manipulation, disguised as something more serious. He advised me to ignore it and not respond. But being me, I felt the need to make them clear what I thought. So, I wrote an email and sent it directly to them. "Mom, Dad, I'm disappointed, but not surprised. This will is not an attempt at reconciliation. It is another attempt at control. After years of criticism, rejection, and manipulation, you think that now you can tie me to you legally? It's not going to happen. I owe you nothing. Everything I have, I achieved on my own, without your support. And you made it clear for years that my life and my decisions did not matter to you. Now you intend to use your will to force me to fulfill your expectations. I am not going to sign anything or commit to anything. If you really want a relationship with me, it will have to be one based on respect and sincerity, not on conditions and demands. This is the last time I will talk about this subject. If you insist, I will be forced to cut off contact permanently. I hope you reflect on your priorities because I do not plan to continue being part of this toxic dynamic. I didn't expect an immediate response. But I didn't expect what happened next either. The next day, my aunt called me crying. My parents had confronted her, accusing her of poisoning me against them. They said that this entire conflict was her fault because she was the only one who supported me when I decided to pursue my dream of opening the bakery. My aunt, always strong and direct, made it clear that she had nothing to apologize for. She told me that she told them, "If you had supported your daughter as I did, you would not be in this situation. This has nothing to do with me. It has to do with you and your inability to accept your mistakes." After that, she hung up and called me worried because they kept insisting on finding ways to manipulate the situation. The most frustrating thing was that in the following days, my parents started using social media again. This time, they published more subtle messages, talking about how difficult it is when a child forgets about their parents, or how some sacrifices are not appreciated until it's too late. Family friends started writing to me, some asking what was going on, others giving me speeches about valuing your parents while they are alive. All this led me to make a final decision: cut off contact completely. I blocked their numbers and social media accounts. And I made it clear to close relatives that I did not want to be involved in any more drama. My aunt and my cousin supported me in this. And although some relatives still tried to stick their noses into the matter, I stopped giving explanations. Months passed, and little by little I began to feel some peace. My business continued to grow. In fact, this year I opened a third location. I was able to take a vacation for the first time in a long time. And while I was enjoying my time away, I realized something important. I had spent too many years trying to please people who would never value my effort. I'm not going to lie and say that everything was easy. There were times when I doubted my decision, especially when I thought about my brother, who still saw me as the culprit of the whole situation. But every time I remembered everything I had endured, I knew I had done the right thing. The chapter with my parents is closed for me. I don't know if they will ever reconsider or if they will find a way to reconcile. But I'm no longer going to wear myself out trying to fix something that they broke. Now, my priority is me. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in the right place. And the house in Florida, I have no idea if they ever got it. And honestly, I don't even care anymore.